بسم الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وبعد. Continuing on the topic of backbiting, we've discussed, number one, what it is. We discussed different types of it, and then we discussed how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself views it as something disgusting. Today, inshallah, we'll try to understand why it is bad and why Islam is so against it. And the first and main reason is, the scholars say, لِأَنَّهُ or لِأَنَّهَا إِنْقَاصُ أَحَدٍ فِي حَقِّهِ وَهُوَ غَائِبٌ, because it is lowering or debasing someone else and their right while they are not there. And then the scholars, under this reason, they give three main reasons. And all of these three reasons are based off of the Quran and the Sunnah. The first of these reasons is لِأَنَّهَا ثَلْمٌ فِي الْأُخُوَّةِ الْإِسْلَامِيَّةِ أو لِأَنَّهَا تَهْدِمُ الْأُخُوَّةَ الْإِسْلَامِيَّةِ, that it is a scar or a cut or a slash in what we call the brotherhood of Muslims or the sisterhood of Muslims. That every time you backbite, every time you say something about another human being, you are destroying the brotherhood and the sisterhood of the Muslims. Every single time. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the very same surah, in Surah Al-Hujurat, which we covered yesterday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't just talk about backbiting, but He also says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that indeed the believers are brothers and sisters. And this gives us context on why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to teach us that backbiting is the end of brotherhood and sisterhood. So this is the first reason. The second reason is اشتغال المرء بعيوب الناس وغفلته عن عيبه الذي هو فيه. That a person, when he is occupied with the mistakes and the faults and the shortcomings of other people, he becomes oblivious of his own mistakes, of his own shortcomings, and the thing that he or she is supposed to work on himself. And the reason for this is the Prophet ﷺ said, مِنْ حُسْنِ إِسْلَامِ الْمَرْءِ تَرْكُهُ مَا لَا يَعْنِي. From the perfection of one's Islam is to concern himself with himself and not to concern himself with what other people are doing or what other people are saying. So that's number two, that it makes you focus on other people instead of focusing on yourself, and that's why it's bad. The third thing is لِأَنَّهَا تُنْتِجُ عَدَمَ التَّفَكُّرِ عَنِ اللَّهِ وَتُبْعِدُهُ عَنِ اللَّهِ. That backbiting, it causes you to forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it causes you to move away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because instead of busying yourself with the remembrance of the Creator, you're busying yourself with the faults and the remembrance of the created. And this is why these are the three main reasons why we stay away from backbiting. But moving on and understanding how these apply, there are hidden things that people end up falling for. There are slight and subtle ways of backbiting that you and me might not necessarily recognize. The first example that the scholars give is the example within themselves. They say, إِيَّاكَ وَغِيبَةَ الْقُرَّاءِ الْمُرَائِينَ. They say, beware of backbiting the Qurra. The Qurra doesn't mean the reciters of Quran. Over here it means the scholars. Beware of backbiting the scholars that are show-offs. They're bad, meaning they're showing off. But beware of backbiting them. What does this mean? The scholars, they explain it. They say, for example, if I come up to someone else and I say, what do you think about such and such scholar? What do you think about such and such person? What do you think about such and such imam? So on and so forth. And the person, he says, أَصْلَحَنَ اللَّهُ وَإِيَّاهُ, that, oh Allah, rectify me or us and rectify him. Right? Rectify us and rectify him. What is the person actually saying? He's saying that that person is bad, and so maybe Allah should rectify him. Meaning, in a slight way, you ended up backbiting him and conveying information to the other person that this scholar or this person is a bad person. Unfortunately, we do that sometimes. When you see somebody bad, somebody asks about that person, and you say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make him a better Muslim. You don't intend the actual dua. You intend to show that that person is bad. And this is a subtle way of falling into backbiting. And the reason why this is even worse is because when you say, أَصْلَحَنَ اللَّهُ وَإِيَّاهُ, when you say, may Allah rectify us and him, you're actually insinuating that you're good and that you're righteous and that that person has something wrong with him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. Do not, tell yourself that you're good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows who is good. So this is a slight way that we end up falling into it. Or if someone asks you about someone else, and then you start the sentence with, I don't want to backbite, and then for 15 or 20 minutes you start talking about the person. I don't want to backbite, but then you still backbite. Or if someone says, Allahumma la ghiba, oh Allah, there's no ghiba in this, but then they spend 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour talking about someone else. People do that because they think if I say, oh Allah, I'm not backbiting, that Allah will let them go even if they backbite. This is still backbiting, right? And in the time of Taqiyuddin as-Subki, one of the great scholars, his little son Tajuddin, who was also later on a scholar, they were sitting together. And a dog passes by their gathering. And his little son, he says, Kalb ibn Kilab, or a dog of the dogs. A dog of the dogs. And his father, he told him, don't say that. Don't say that. And he says to his father, Alaysa ma qultu haqqa? Isn't what I said the truth? Isn't that a dog who is the child of dogs? And his father said, لو قلتها بشرط البيان لا إشكال ولو قلتها مقدمة لإنقاص حق مخلوق الله فهي مقدمة للغيبة. That if you said it to explain, like how a doctor or scientist explains that this child is the daughter or the son of this animal, that's normal, that's science, that's explanation, that's bayan. But if you intended for it to be a precursor or an introduction towards degrading the level or the status of one of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you began on the road to backbiting. Sometimes we say, that person is short, and you're like, I'm saying a fact. But you start with short, and then you say he's not good at basketball. You fall into backbiting, even though that's a simple example, right? So these things you have to be very, very careful. And this is why he was trying to teach his son that even for the dog, have ihtiram. Honor the dog. Because if you don't honor the dog, you're going to dishonor human beings later. And so this is stuff that we have to stay away from. And the last thing that I want to mention is that there is a form known as ghibatul qalb. Imam al-Nawawi, he mentions a whole chapter about ghibatul qalb, or backbiting of the heart, in his book. What is backbiting of the heart? For example, you and me, we have a fight. We have a altercation. And you say that I lied to you, or something like that. Somebody lies to you. And then you go back, you leave that altercation, and in your heart, you keep on playing the same thing over. That person lied to me, that person is like this, he's like that, he's bad, he's evil. And you keep on repeating those same thoughts in your heart until you reach a conviction that that person is bad. This is ghibatul qalb. This is backbiting people in your heart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, امتحن الله قلوبهم للتقوى. That Allah, He's going to test your heart for taqwa. He doesn't want your heart to be filled with grudges or jealousy or even thinking about other people and their bad qualities. He wants you to fill your heart with His remembrance and no one else. Take everybody else and their issues out of your mind. And this is why the scholars, they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even checks the heart. He checks our words, He checks our actions, and He checks our heart. The initial thought, for example, you have an initial thought when somebody hurts you. We all have it, it's natural. The initial thought is ma'fuun an, it's forgiven. There's no problem. But if you keep on lingering and you think about all of the grudges and all of the past and all of the hurt and all of the pain, this is what you will be tested for. This is what you will get in trouble for. And the reason, what is the proof for all of this, you might ask, is when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَجَاوَزَ لِأُمَّتِي مَا حَدَّثَتْ بِهِ أَنفُسَهَا مَا لَمْ يَتَكَلَّمُوا أَوْ يَعْمَلُوا بِهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives the ummah of Muhammad for everything that it speaks to itself, everything that it speaks to its heart and its soul, as long as they don't speak or they don't act upon it. But there's a subtle understanding of مَا حَدَّثَتْ بِهِ أَنفُسَهَا. It refers to the initial thought is forgiven, the initial bad thought, the initial su'al dhan that you might have of other people. But after that, you're supposed to replace it with having a good opinion of other people. So now the question comes, what is the practical solution? What if somebody hurts me? What if somebody harms me? How do I get rid of this ghibatul qalb? It's very simple. It is to make dua for that person. Raise your hand and say, Oh Allah, forgive that person. Oh Allah, give him better. Oh Allah, make him better. Oh Allah, make me better. You make dua for him when he's not there. You replace backbiting of the heart, which is in his absence, with dua, which is in his absence, which is far greater. And this is something that you and me have to understand in a way that sometimes shaitan, he wants us to focus on the wrong. It's our job to focus on the right. In fact, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would see Umar, he would say, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ مَا لَقِيَكَ الشَّيْطَانِ قَدْ سَالِكًا فَجًّا إِلَّا سَلَكَ فَجًّا غَيْرَ فَجِّكَ. That he would tell Umar that whenever shaitan sees you, whenever shaitan meets you, shaitan, he takes the other way. What does this mean? It means that every time the Umar radiallahu anhu would want to sleep at night, he would stand up and he would pray. Every time Umar radiallahu anhu wanted to get angry, he would smile. Every time Umar radiallahu anhu wanted to fight, he would control himself. Every single thing that shaitan wanted him to do, he would always do the opposite. And so what would shaitan do? Shaitan would say, there's no point in messing with Umar, because every time I mess with Umar, he does exactly the opposite of what I tell him. So shaitan would leave him alone. In the same exact way, every time your heart, it tells you, hey, keep thinking about that grudge. Hey, keep backbiting about that person. Do the opposite and displease shaitan and please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our shortcomings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit from the reminder. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.